Welcome to Weekly Wings, your go-to podcast from dronelife.com. We appreciate everybody tuning in and listening to get your industry insights. As always, joining myself is Samuel Stansberry and Terry Neff. Samuel, how are you doing this week?
Doing well. Trying to stay dry. We have some crazy weather rolling in right now, but otherwise good and excited to talk about some drone news.
Awesome. And Terry, how are you doing this week?
Doing fantastic. Good UFC event. So nothing to hate on this weekend.
Yeah, get your money's worth.
Yeah, I got my money's worth. Dan Hooker's fight single-handedly sold the pay-per-view for me.
Yeah, it was pretty epic. We're jumping right into it because there really is a lot that we're going to touch on in this week's episode, looking at a few different pieces of news coming out of the drone delivery space and the drone tech spotlight. We'll look at an article with the U.S. Army looking at some anti-drone technology and also how IKEA is using drones for inventory. We'll visit University of Texas to see how they are using a batting cage on steroids to advance their drone operations. We'll be at the beach, where I am not the biggest fan of, but we'll go there anyway. Look at how a shark drone pilot is leveraging unmanned technologies to look at and monitor some shark activities, and we'll end looking at questions that people can start to look forward to as commercial UAV is just around the corner. And one thing I did want to share before we jump into the drone delivery piece is last week we talked about Ørsted, the company that is involved in wind turbines.
I think
ORST.
Was that last week or 2 episodes ago?
That was last week.
Okay. I'm getting my timelines confused.
Yeah. Well, this I ended up finding because we didn't have any video. It was just photos from the discussion. This photo is a close-up of the drone itself, so we can see looks like a quad but has stacked motors. So we're looking at an octocopter here. And then there is this video, which I wanted to play. Ooh, what happened there? And so for folks on the audio only, big old drone, massive drone in the water, you can see in the background dozens of wind turbines, and this drone is carrying a very large orange bag. I don't know, it could be about 30, 40 feet hanging below the drone. And these wind turbines have these massive platforms.
Oh, it just releases.
So this is how they are, and the drone lowers this package on what looks to be a very large platform. What do you guys think about that? And then here's a boat we're also sharing. I just doing some follow-up here. I found out that this company has also integrated unmanned water vessels in order to go out and do potential pre-surveys for new locations. It has a wind sensor on it, some GPS, really neat stuff. What do you guys think about that video?
Is it a hybrid boat? Like, that's not a purely EV boat, I'm assuming.
I think it looks pretty small. Should be small.
It's a hybrid of a vessel and a buoy because it can turn itself into a buoy.
Yeah, when it gets a little too
it might be all. It has solar panels on its exterior.
I do feel like if it was purely EV, they would kind of broadcast that, though, you know?
Right. Well, you can do some follow-up on that one there, Samuel.
That I will.
But the size and how they're like how they're potentially redesigning the windmills themselves in order to receive drone deliveries. I think that's probably an interesting piece. The way that vertiports, the way that, airports are having to kind of reconfigure, potentially, quick serve restaurants. Speaking of restaurants, drones delivering. Flytrex reaches new heights. Drone Life article, 100,000 drone deliveries and counting in the United States.
I know nothing about this company. It's crazy.
Quite a few delivery bags there.
Yeah, that is a lot of bags.
That's really awesome to hear, though, especially considering that's almost been in operations in the States for almost 4 years?
I think so. And so what would be, as far as involvement, Samuel and Terry, I think you have a LinkedIn, Terry. I'm not on there often.
I think I do have a profile. I don't know how in depth that thing is, but it exists.
And so with all your, Sam, you can go first. As far as drone delivery goes, do you have like a experience or, something that you've done that has kind of stuck with you?
Yeah, I would say I do have some of that very firsthand experience, having worked with Flytrix specifically. So it's been a crazy cool experience to see them go from probably a handful of deliveries to quite literally over 100,000 deliveries now. Quite wild in my imagination, but that's awesome. I would say just purely from the aviation standpoint where it's put my mind at, because when I went into this, it was a lot more on the ground, a lot more just kind of not nearly as technical and maybe not nearly as safety orientated as it's pushed me to be now. And I think that's one of the really cool aspects of it, especially seeing all the technology that's improved upon over the last 4 years. That's kind of taught me different tools I can rely on as a drone operator and just someone who's going to be looking at routes as safety mitigation. I think that's one of the things it's taught me. One of the things I can take away from it specifically, It's a nice looking drone.
And Terry, is there anything in your experience drone delivery wise that kind of sticks out to you, or like a moment as an ambassador
Well, yeah. So, I think a lot of people want drone delivery, and I don't know how many times I've heard, "Wow, I wish this was near my house." Like it may not even be around the corner. It might be just right down the road from you, from being where you can get drone delivery. And this is only going to develop further, no matter what company it is. It will be the future. Amazon will be sending your packages through hundreds of drones. I don't know how I feel about that, but hundreds of drones flying around. It is a very exciting future for aviation, to say the least.
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting because I think a lot of folks thought a few years back it was uncontrolled airspace that might have been like that differentiating factor between where we would see drone delivery and where we wouldn't see drone delivery. And it almost seems like with the way the technology is laid out, the way people are looking at safety and risk mitigation, that may be almost shifting, like a paradigm shift in the drone delivery market of the unmanned industry. And with that, it's really interesting because we could talk about this for probably a whole hour, just drone delivery. We've seen the week before, last week or the week before, it was the announcements by Google and was it Zipline? I think Google and Zipline are the ones that both have announced, right, beyond visual line of sight without visual observers in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But then we're also seeing the other side, and here information has come out that Amazon's, like this article, this headline here, Amazon's troubled drone delivery program faces latest challenge in Texas, annoyed residents.
Never heard that one before.
Was it Drone Up that one of their drones got shot recently? Was that
Oh,
Up,
I remember
right?
that story, Terry. I vaguely remember that story.
You could
Yep.
say some of them
Can't
get
remember the guy's
annoyed.
name.
It was a Florida person.
It was a Florida person. Yeah, that's right. Local Florida man.
Florida man, and he said he thought it was spying on him, something along those lines. Allegedly. Now remember, all this was like allegedly. But noise complaints, when you think noise complaints, in my experience, I think, drones, especially in more rural areas, they're going to stick out a little more, but there's less people, right? In a more sparsely populated area, noise pollution is a bit more limited, but in your more densely populated areas, you have, a bit more background, more houses packed together, more weed whacker, leaf blower sounds, engines running. So, but this drone looks huge, doesn't it?
It does.
It does look fairly big. I've actually never seen. Is this the drone they're using, or is it like?
I think so. I would have to. I don't know, but we're in College Station here for this news article, and just to continue to just take, like, we can circle back to which drone they're using, or might find it here. I guess residents in College Station have, we're seeing nurses, police officers, firefighters, it's disrupting their sleep during the day. So individuals
very light sleepers.
Well,
I got to agree with you there, Terry. That's kind of crazy. Like, I mean, do they have a rating scale of what the drone, besides, a swarm of bees? Like, is there a certain decibel that it's hitting?
Swarm of bees. It's funny you say that, because the semi-retired orthodontist said in an interview, it sounds like a giant hive of bees.
Like, that's his scale of what it sounds like.
Yeah, and it's coming because it's pretty loud.
Semi-retired, huh?
I mean, I just don't know. I'm not an investigator, but like, it's pretty loud. That's kind of like...
I feel like I'm a little desensitized to sound because I live right next to Fort Bragg, and if my house isn't shaking because of a bomb going off, it's a helicopter passing over.
Might be biased then, Terry.
It's not that loud, okay? What do you have, paper walls? What's going on?
Notably, too, I think it's all during the daytime hours, at least with the operations I'm familiar with, and I'm assuming these operations as well. I don't see these drones flying around people's houses at night, or even when the sun is starting. I mean, maybe a little closer towards sunset and a little beyond that, but I can't imagine they're doing anything past 9 p.m.
Well, it is a little different. I don't know if any of you have worked third shift. Your sleep during the day is usually terrible as is, so they probably are sleeping pretty light, because you're not supposed to be asleep from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's just, your body's not liking that. So you probably do sleep pretty light.
That's your circadian rhythm.
Circadian rhythm. There you go.
Yeah. But I guess it is interesting because Brian Woods, College Station's city manager, said at a meeting that officials had tested the drone with noise levels between 47 and 61 decibels, and chainsaws typically run, at 125 decibels, with heavy equipment being at 95 to 110.
Is that like
notably
what
a
distance
garbage
is that?
truck decibel is around 100?
And that's the other thing that you always have to figure is like, well, what altitude were they, measuring? Did the city do the tests at?
I do
Right.
feel like that's a little. I mean, from our experience, I feel like if it is at like cruising altitude, and I just looked up decibel levels, and a normal conversation's around 60 decibels. So if it's 60 decibels, 400 feet in the air, or whatever it's flying at, that is kind of loud, I would say.
Okay. And this I've seen, right? The MK30. I have seen this. This is their newer, like their latest. It uses the industry leading sense and avoid technology. So like camera system on front, like this is,
That's a pretty drone, man.
Yeah. But here's what they're using now, right? Like if I'm going to go back to the other one, this is the latest. And and then this looks like what they
That's
could.
a chunky boy.
Yeah. So, because in the article it does mention that they, spoke with someone from Amazon, and they shared that there is a move to operate this MK30 drone, which is at the end of July. They had
180 to 377.
Yeah, they had a meeting with residents, except when descending to drop the packages. So it stays at that 180, above 180, and they're hoping to roll this out. It said, I guess, later this year.
Notably, I do kind of want to point out, not that this isn't a valid concern, but I do feel like there's a lot of people that are already unhappy with certain drones in their communities, and this just might be something they can point a finger at. And of course, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Sam. I'd say the sound is easier to measure or point out than than you can't prove that it's taken a picture of you, but you can certainly complain about sound. I think that's what you were kind of alluding to.
Yeah, I mean, this can be kind of their scapegoat in a sense, and again, it can have valid concerns here, but overall, I don't feel like this is going to be the end all destruction of the drone delivery service. Especially at its current decibel range, but it's just kind of what I'm thinking.
And again, I think it's really interesting to see that we have, all in this area, right, of Texas now, where things seem to be moving. You have the positive stories and these stories regarding, the cons, the pros and the cons of drone delivery. I think it's similar to what you also see at airports, right, when airports are going to come in. And then the final piece here, where we've been on this kind of drone delivery aspect of the industry, is Drone Up is shutting down. What's been reported is 18, I think 17, 18, something in the mid 15 to 18 of their stations in states like Utah, Arizona, and one other.
Would it be Florida? Is it because of Dennis? Dennis single-handedly got him out of Florida.
Did he clear? Yeah, yeah. Tampa, according to the reports. And so what they've openly communicated was 70 job losses, but they're focusing efforts on Dallas, Fort Worth. Interesting that, not all the articles, but this Drone XL article happens to, somebody, under anonymity claims the startup is struggling. with poor management, employee mistreatment, limited access to drone hardware, and financial difficulties. It sounds like a startup environment.
Yeah. Wow, a startup's not doing well? That's crazy.
Or they're dealing with resources, like lack of technology and technological resources. I think in general, the industry, if talking to anybody, we talked about this in some of our early episodes for this season, how not Amazon, but Google Wing was pivoting and looking at, I think, India, in order to have their drones manufactured there. I think the whole Chinese, the CCP, the limitation on where you can and can't purchase your components is putting everybody in a bind for access to technology. But then again, it's like, you do things, you start things here and there, and it does seem like a lot of focus is in Dallas right now when it comes to the drone delivery space from a approval standpoint, and then UTM with the big announcements just weeks earlier from Google Wing announcing that beyond visual line of sight without.
By the way, for the listeners, if you're wondering why Paul is talking very softly, kind of like Bob Ross, it's because it is 10 p.m. This is a very late recording for us. We usually do it around afternoon. It's
kind of like ASMR though. I kind of it's mellowing me out. Like it's a good.
Well, normally
vibe.
I'm
listening to NPR tonight.
Yeah, we're pivoting a little bit here and try not to wake.
I was trying to see where Google was manufacturing their chips, like seeing if it was how much of their production they did move to India, but I couldn't find anything immediate.
Well, Wing, if you type in Wing, wasn't it?
Well, I was thinking India? They were doing stuff with their Pixel phones too, but I couldn't find anything immediately on that.
And so what we're going to look at next, pivoting from drone, looking at the tech spotlight, and something we've spoken a little bit, the counter UAS technology, the military use of counter UAS. And what was really interesting was the article that popped up in Defense One was that there was an anti-drone shootout that lets experienced soldiers ring out latest gear. And so what that is like, instead of bringing a bunch of firearms, trying them all out, a shootout, it was bringing together manufacturers of counter drone technology at Fort Drum in New York in order to kind of, take, everyone's tech that they were willing to bring and set it up and put it through the paces in a real life environment. And so this really does speak to how the military right now needs counter drone technology that can detect the threat, and counter drone technology that's going to eliminate that threat without a human in the loop. You guys, what are your thoughts on this? Did you get the invite?
I wish. It would have been fun, man. You get to shoot a railgun at a drone? Come on. Where was this held at? Texas?
No, so this is in Fort Drum, New York.
New York?
Yeah, they picked a good time to go to Fort Drum. But they're referencing Ukraine drones that are flying at speeds over 100 miles an hour. Right, so it's that's the other thing. There's drone detection for, the commercial space. Like we talk about counter UAS technology for protecting VIPs, like the Trump assassination incident. That individual was flying a DJI drone that because of design limitations, really, unless it's in a tailwind, won't go over 35 miles an hour. So that's a lot easier to detect than a UAS of half the size going 100 miles an hour. And so I think this is like the ultimate, I guess, open competition for counter UAS technology.
That's kind of quite the testing ground in a sense, but I'm curious what kind of what is it available to? Like, I'm assuming, like you said, invite only.
Yeah, certainly invite only. And then I'm as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, I wonder the other thing too is how do you the technology to have the drones that can fly. So you've got to have pilots out there that are really skilled in order to test the counter UAS.
Right.
So
Put
it's
them
not
through
just
their
about
paces.
it's not just about getting the best counter UAS tech on site for testing and showcasing, but it's also then having to have the, most capable combat, not simulating, but combat reenacting UAS technology as well. So that was probably a really, really interesting get together.
We're gonna start seeing drones with the like the anti-radar paneling, so they can't be detected by radar next. It's got to be what's next.
And so, yeah, they're talking about, right, counter drone weapons that fire into the air, which possess a risk. But this could possess a risk. Whereas the use of more exotic weapons, like electronic warfare systems or lasers, also risk affecting systems. But they're trying everything.
If you could get like a super high-powered laser that has great tracking, I don't see how that would not take down a drone. Just overheat the battery immediately.
Maybe there was like a NOTAM around Fort Drum a couple weeks ago. GPS interference, laser in and around. Well,
Notably, there's no videos attached with that article, so I'm hoping that we can
it's on a
see some of
military
that
base.
defense.
It's
See
on
some
TikTok.
of those defense
yeah.
weapons in. It's on TikTok, you said?
It's on TikTok.
I'm kidding, joking.
I was about to
Wouldn't
say
be
they're
too
worried about
surprised.
China. They're just posting it on TikTok.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, when are we going to come out with the marketing video for it? Because every other country is, doing marketing videos to show off their advanced.
The actual useful stuff is not being marketed on TikTok. That is just something you got to know. If it comes to you in an ad, it's not good.
I like that. That should be a bumper sticker. I'm going to come up with bumper stickers, and I'm going to. Well, moving away from military and moving into something that I just thought was super, super fascinating, just intriguing. I don't know how I feel about IKEA, but this is
You have
news.
divisive thoughts on IKEA?
Oh, just the it's like Disney for adults, I guess. It's like
For the
amusement.
Disney adult furniture is what you might think.
No, like the traveling. There's not like an IKEA anywhere. And some of this stuff they won't ship. Like you have to go pick it up. So it's...
I'm going to go off topic real quick, just for a second. So there's a game I play. It's called Tarkov. In the game, there is a kind of like a ripoff of an IKEA bag, but it's like made into a tactical rig. So you can carry your mags. It's something you can get. I'm just thinking, since that game's based in Russia, when am I going to get the IKEA drone that I can hunt somebody down with? The IKEA bomb drone. Can I get that in the game now?
I don't think that's going to hit the shelves for a while, Terry.
They're pretty lazy devs. Probably not.
His IKEA knockoff bag. He wants his IKEA drone to go with it. Yeah, no, that's interesting. What's the game?
Escape from Tarkov. It's an
Escape.
extraction shooter. Military. It's realistic.
And are you like a U.S. military person?
You can be.
Oh.
Yeah.
You can pick what side you want to be on.
Well, there's Bear and then whatever the other one is.
Yeah. Well, this is I don't know if they're going to introduce this into your game anytime soon, but now that this article has come out, I mean, there's maybe a higher chance.
I'm going to forward it to them. I'll find their email.
You need to get that specific skin for the drone, Terry.
And it's got to have the branding on brand. So IKEA expands its inventory drone fleet. So it has a fleet. It uses fleets of drones in order to track warehouse inventory. I mean, how awesome
is it?
Stationary cameras? I don't know.
Well, I mean, the thing is, they're probably packing so much stuff into all the aisles, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, I think Amazon kind of, like in the Amazon warehouses, they have like sensors and then they have cameras and they kind of like use a combination of both to track.
Yeah, that does make, like, you could use weight, but then that requires, even putting cameras in requires like running wires and installing infrastructure. So that might be my only thought, is that they're looking,
opposed to flying drone in building that could malfunction because it's made by IKEA. I mean, IKEA is not known for their quality. That's all I'm saying.
well, they don't. The thing is they might even have like automatic robots moving the stuff around. There might not even be like people or anything
dogs.
I just think it's a little impractical. Maybe they're not using it like how I think they're using it, but having a drone flying around scanning as opposed to bolting a camera to the roof.
Oh, because it says right here, right? The little scanning drones can provide around-the-clock updates to inventory and reach heights that humans and most robots can't. So these, like, the heights of these shelves are, I can only imagine, are probably easily 60 feet.
I was going to say going to the warehouse
70.
ceiling, most likely.
And so these drones are just going up and down. You're just scanning all their shelves. And it's like a startup. It's just another, we talked about startups in the beginning where, if you think about it too, like during COVID, I don't know, people were just still trying to sell stuff and maintain inventory and figure out what's where. And if you can't have people even coming into your warehouses, but you have robots, I hear what you're saying, Terry, like cameras, but these are cameras.
Yeah, but it's stationary cameras. They're cheaper than a drone. And you just combine, I mean, yeah, it's going to take a lot of wiring, but I mean, you have money. I don't know.
They might not be cheaper though when you got to run the wiring, you got to put more than one up. This is just one or two drones that then travel the whole warehouse because you don't need the inventory like every second, right? A camera sitting there is going to be telling you your inventory like constantly. Like
Wasn't that what you want?
Timmy pulls a pallet and it's like immediately like almost like I think what they want is daily inventory at a minimum. So if all the work happens and people are pulling and then at the end of that day the drone just flies the whole warehouse and it's like calculated and then they know exactly what they have.
Is the camera on the bottom? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but is the camera on the bottom?
I don't know if this looks like the back or if this is the sensor right here. That looks like more of a vent. And then
I would like to note that what is clearly a charging system for the drone is actually pretty neat. It's just kind of like around the base. I don't know if you see the connectors right there. I'm assuming that's the charging, like how you charge it.
Yeah, and there's no pilot. Like it's inside. This is in
a drone in a box.
A lot of this is overseas, so there's no like actual pilot flying it. This is the epitome of drone automation.
I think that's kind of cool, though. I mean, specifically when drones come into your industry, I feel like all these different industries are specifically trying to find, hey, new technology, it's a drone, let's see what we can do with it, how we can apply it to our industry. So it's kind of cool to see all the different uses in this one kind of specifically, because I know we have talked maybe briefly about something like this, but this is like a pretty practical use application of it.
And so 2021, right after COVID is when they kicked this off in Switzerland. IKEA did. And now they're using this across 16 locations in Belgium, Croatia, Slovenia, Germany, Italy, and the Netherlands. And then something that we might be able to look into future episodes is it seems like there's, competitors to Verity. So Verity is the startup. Verity is the company that manufactures the drone, and it seems like IKEA is very, an early investor potentially, or very early adopter of the product. But you have competitors: Corvus Robotics, Gather AI, and Indoor Robotics. But yeah, I don't know. That's super. Go ahead.
Go to their website real quick. They have a homepage that has a video of it in work. I feel like that would be good for us to visualize.
Yeah.
Verity.
Oh yeah, good
It
call,
even has
Terry.
a little light on it.
Yeah, that's so. Oh man, yeah. Where were you, Terry, with this call? So many minutes ago.
What,
you just couldn't do this with like a permanently fixed camera.
Why not? You could literally put one every other stud.
Oh my goodness.
Every level.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Just
all right. How about this? I'll start a company and I'll compete with them. I'll be an anti-drone warehouse storage. I don't even know what to call it.
Hey man, you've got the motivation now. That's how it all begins. The motivation.
One of the first big steps, isn't it?
Yeah, that's really awesome. I can remember like people talking. Yeah. A few years ago. It all makes sense in Switzerland.
Of course,
Switzerland. This is where everything's happening. Switzerland and the University of Texas. Drone Life article came out. University employs huge batting cage to conduct drone test flights. What do you guys think about that? You guys play baseball?
Going just off the title, that sounds pretty cool. Almost as cool as the firing range in New York with drones.
Yeah. Well, you might want to be in a net when you're testing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I've seen a drone cage.
Syracuse? Is that what you're referencing?
In Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Yeah, so they've got a 150 by 100 by 60 foot tall, what they call a batting cage, or what's, what their professor of mechanical engineering has referenced. The best analogy is a baseball batting cage. And in that aspect, I say on steroids. It's like a baseball batting cage on steroids. Everybody knows people that hit home runs really far in the 2000s like steroids. No baseball people here. Yeah, Elizabeth City State University has one of these in North Carolina. This is something that we're seeing pop up, I'd say more often or not, on college campuses, because it allows for a location to have students without their Part 107 conduct some pretty like advanced flight research type of operations. When it comes,
how did this cost anywhere near $150,000 to make? Is it just not a bunch of like telephone poles with net around it?
So 60 feet tall. So those poles go 60 feet tall. So I think there's like, I can't remember if it's like a third of the height of the pole has to be, that's for fencing. Like if you're putting up fence, if it's a 6 foot fence, you want to put like 2 feet in the ground. But I can imagine for these 60 foot poles, you're probably putting them like 10 feet in the ground.
I don't know. I just feel like that's a bit much for wooden poles in the ground.
And then the cost of these nets, and I say this because growing up, a lot of experience with batting cages. A batting cage net, I don't know, runs hundreds of dollars. I think a cheap batting cage on a short side was going to cost you $400 or $500 for just the net, and then the steel. So like a home backyard batting cage on the cheapest side, which might not even be 62 feet. If you want to have like full length pitching, it has to be a 70 foot long cage. That's like $2,000, $1,500, $2,000. If you're paying someone else to install it and not yourself, you might be paying $4,000, $3,500 for a home batting cage that is nowhere near this size. So those poles, I couldn't imagine like how much just one of those wooden poles cost. But my father had a batting cage growing up, and the net was like the most painful, or not painful, I don't know, cost absorbing aspect. One time the pole snapped in the winter because the net wasn't taken down and the snow will build up on the net.
I don't know. I don't feel like it has to be. I mean, maybe something that's more durable. I feel like they could have used any type of material for that and it wouldn't have been, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you want the wind. The biggest thing is you want to have the real outdoor conditions in that sense. But when you have a net like this, you can submit a waiver to the FAA. Like if you want to, research multiple drones flying at one time, how can you ensure and communicate to the FAA that nothing seriously bad will go wrong? Well, worst case scenario, drone flies into the net and everyone's safe.
Considering
So
with
that's
everything going on in Texas being such a hotbed for the drone industry right now, this kind of makes perfect sense to have the kind of like testing facility there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, but it only goes 60 feet high, so when it comes to like, exactly what you can do at what you can really mimic. But for a student standpoint, again, to be able to just take students and kind of just throw them, out into an environment where it's almost like a sandbox where you can be out in the environmental conditions, but also having an extra layer of safety. So I think UAS test sites would probably be locations you'll see more of these kind of nets pop up. Maybe like a Top Golf near you. If a Top Golf ever ever fails, which I'm not sure that'll ever happen, you can always just put netting over the top and turn it into a drone test site.
I don't know. I can't get over it. I feel like you could have probably put up a metal building bigger than that for 150K.
I don't know, man. Inflation. I heard it's bad these days.
It's terrible.
And so here we're moving, from the educational campus space. There is this really neat article that came out. It was Meet the Drone Pilot Who Tracks Shark Movement Along Coast. So we've got this video here.
Give us just a little bit better.
And they go on and on. The guys, like here, they set this whole thing up as far as like who this person is. And I kind of jump to the part where the drone pilot's going to speak and he's going to talk about, what he's doing and how he's doing it and what the drone provides.
Of a look as to how they behave. It's been 4 years of fascination slowly turning into expertise as Scott Fairchild has recorded some of the most intimate juvenile white shark behaviors to date.
Learn, watch their tendencies, their behaviors, because they're quite repetitive. In fact, they're consistent, very. So yeah, it's amazing to watch what they do, don't do, and it's every time, like clockwork.
Like Jane Goodall with the silverback gorillas, Fairchild has no formal training in marine biology, but his passion and patience have garnered international attention as his shark encounter videos start to shine some light on behaviors most have only guessed at.
They're clearly choosing to be together, but not literally interact. And so if they get anywhere within a couple hundred yards of each other, they just go to each other always. And then their personal space is about 10 to 20 feet and always break off.
The videos shot in San Diego County over the last 4 years have also shown encounters with swimmers, surfers, and paddleboarders, showing what Fairchild calls the shark's slow, passive curiosity.
Sound paddlers, they'll come, always from behind.
Yeah, not a fan of the beach. Like, is this not scary?
And
is that not frightening?
Point of their senses, if you look at them, they'll break off.
And with over 1,000...
They're almost like cats. Like they just want to kind of
I
like
don't know if
watch you. Well, they're like the cats of the ocean. They'll like come up to. They're not going to attack you if you mess with them. They'll attack you. Don't touch its belly. Like
just don't look like a surfer or something. You'll be okay.
I mean, you have a. I mean, have you ever heard this the stat where if you have a higher chance of dying by a vending machine falling on you than getting bit by a shark?
I hadn't heard that one.
But last this is updated.
But Scott Fairchild at Scott Fairchild. So anyone who also probably wants to see some just like epic photos and videos of that at Scott_Fairchild, I think is what it was on maybe like Instagram or social media. So I really wanted to just highlight for like the drone pilots to go and see this was I just thought that was so epic because here's someone who what they mentioned is not a marine biologist. Right. This is someone who, but if you listen to him talk, he can tell you all the patterns, right? He's just watched these sharks from a perspective that some marine biologists have never even, watched these animals from. And so he talks about how, like Terry mentioned, I do think they are kind of like the cat, because if it was a dog, it would have just either barked at you, or it wouldn't have even known you were there. Whereas these things, to me, it seemed like they're very curious, right? And just like a cat, like I always thought about that with a cat. Like, hey, if I just don't look at the cat, then the cat won't look at me. And if I don't touch the cat won't bother me. Whereas dog is just like sniffing all up in your business and just like, again, barks louder than the bite. Whereas the cat's just kind of like, once it's on your face, like
and it's over.
But Scott Fairchild, I mean, and I just thought that was really cool because they just seem to really, hammer on the point of, well, he's not even a no, he's a robot.
Well, it kind of seems like he took two of his passions and combined them, and I'm sure we'll start seeing more people do that. I mean, who knows? It's endless possibilities. He liked sharks. He clearly likes sharks, and he likes drones. So he was like, how can I use this drone to learn more about sharks? I mean, it's just two passion projects merging.
And then how do you bring that individual in now to work alongside the marine biologist? And that's where all these, opportunities exist for folks when they're like, what should I do? What should we? You're not recreating something. You're adding value to, like, you're not figuring something out. An occurrence or something that already exists, and you're applying the drone in a way that the people who are already doing it either couldn't or aren't. And so you would think this could be integrated into, if they weren't already using drones, like, right? Like the preventative aspect. They put the shark flags out and stuff, but how, this activity. And so drones monitoring. But then again, people are going to see the drones and they're going to think that like, oh, there's the drones. There's the Chinese drones flying up and down the eastern seaboard, keeping those Americans in line again. They got speakers on them. Stay out. There's a shark.
Don't worry, you can have Dennis come and liberate you with his gun.
Yeah.
The local Florida man, Dennis. I believe that was his name. I could be mistaken.
It was Dennis, yes.
But out in San Diego, I thought that was really... And what it was is they were comparing it to Dian Fossey. Like Dian Fossey with the silver...
I don't think that's... Yeah, go ahead.
As if he's like up there touching and swimming with the sharks. This guy's like flying a drone from the beach.
Probably under an umbrella, just peeking out. Yep, good line of sight.
He probably doesn't even leave the parking lot, let's be honest. Why would he go get sand in his shoes? He just sits in the parking lot.
Dian Fossey, and just for fun, I'm like looking at this. I'm like, yeah, this person's like hanging out in the jungle with the gorillas and their babies, just writing her notes.
I think this is important context for the younger viewers here, I don't know. I totally did not know about that. Did you, Terry?
I've seen her before. I don't really. Never researched.
It's probably like turning some gears in my head that I've just totally put away somewhere. But yeah, that's a wild comparison.
Let's just not overlook the fact that Dian Fossey was assassinated.
That's
the day after Christmas.
Who assassinated her and why? What did she know?
I mean, I know this is Weekly Wings. I'm pretty sure. I think we focus on the drone industry. I know there are some podcasts out there that dive into the murder mysteries, but this is pretty wild. Because I was like, I was just gonna be like, oh yeah, Dian Fossey, and then move on. And it's like, oh wow, had to have been it makes sense,
She knew too much.
Knew too much. Was it the gorillas or was it the anti-animal rights? You got the animal rights activist, which I can imagine she was, and then you've got the the people in the movie who have excavators and just want to tear jungles down. And I'm sure those
I think it's
people,
when she started teaching them sign language, they broke a barrier that was probably too much.
What's the name of the guy who watches the sharks?
Scott Fairchild, I believe.
Scott Fairchild. He's got to look out.
Yeah, we got to get him a bulletproof vest.
Protect that man at all costs.
Maybe he should. Wow, that's pretty wild. Well, there's something. Like I was familiar with. I think the fact that the person, like you were saying, Samuel, like taught the probably saw in school at one point, but the assassination wasn't familiar. And so the last thing we'll jump into here in this week's episode of Weekly Wings is an article that I just was bringing back up, not the most recent, but commercial UAV is right around the corner. Jeremiah Karpowicz had put this out, 5 questions about commercial drone regulations that will be answered at Commercial UAV Expo. So, what could we potentially expect to hear more of, and what could we possibly be, talking about in the weeks to come, leading up to a lot of, announcements on authorizations. Also, the AVSS parachute recovery system, we are kind of here in the regulatory corner. I was like, man, we don't really have anything regulatory to speak on, and I might have to postpone this here until next week, but we'll breeze through this real quick. One thing, part 108, something that folks probably talk more about, how are FAA officials thinking about the present and future regulations? So that's something that's always going to be talked about when you get a lot of folks together at an expo or a conference. Navigating regulation and infrastructure projects. So, even with the election cycles, we hear a lot about failing infrastructure, whether it be transportation, roadways, railways, energy infrastructure, the need for beyond visual line of sight advancements to use drones to improve our nation's critical infrastructure is something that we'll probably hear or see and find out a lot more of developments coming out of commercial UAV. And then the whole DJI drone ban, it's kind of been quiet for the last couple of weeks. That's certainly going to be talked about often, or at least discussed counter at commercial UAV. And then when will we see any of the regulatory changes as far as Part 108, beyond visual line of sight, possibilities of drone bans? And then, because I just remembered, really from a regulatory standpoint, I don't think we touched on it. Maybe we already did, but I just really thought this was important, was AVSS is a parachute recovery system for drones. They make parachute recovery systems for off-the-shelf drones, as well as work directly with OEMs to make parachute recovery systems for drones that aren't necessarily sold off the shelf. And just 3 days ago, the first Category 2 flight over people in the U.S. occurred in Syracuse, New York. So there is a YouTube video. Billy Kyle put out a video with Josh Ogden. They were together in Syracuse, New York recently. I do think it seemed like it was sometime this month that the video was shot, if not very recently, with the Mavic 3 conducting operations over people, because it meets and it got the approval from the FAA. So huge for operations over people without having to have a waiver. And AVSS works with, again, other operators or other manufacturers like Skydio and Brink drones. So Brink has, talked about wanting to have that drone as a first responder vehicle that can just kind of fly directly to wherever the call came. The FAA is going to want to know that drone has a parachute system, and AVSS is the company that you'll most likely see provide that subsystem in their UAS. What do you guys think about this? Ops over people without waivers.
Especially like you go Syracuse, sending love to Syracuse. But that's honestly really cool to see that kind of introduced to, I'm trying to think the right word here, but I don't know. It seems like a pretty cool thing to have introduced into the drone community specifically.
It's a great idea. I mean, you're going to need a parachute eventually if you plan on doing anything of substantial value.
Yep.
Well, it seems like another safety tool that's being implemented for the community and for wider spread use, I should say. More accessibility for people to have access to.
Yeah.
And Syracuse, I know AVSS, I'm pretty sure they're like a Canadian-based company because they've done all the legwork to get the Canadian approvals. So they recognize that this drone, like the DJI drones, are used not just in the United States, they're used across the globe. So this vehicle meets standards for, it's so clean looking too, right? Like the safety yellow, it's got the cap, it integrates directly into the USB Type-C port, and it directly mounts. So it's also important that the manufacturer, again, has provided the space and the hardware that allows for third-party add-ons.
Well, it's not hindering the design of the vehicle at all. It's kind of complementing it.
Yeah, 100%.
There was one that just kind of like wrapped around the arms of the props. I thought that was a pretty cool design. Just they'll get it on there any way they can.
Yeah, and so it meets the EASA, which is the European requirements for operations over people, and then it also meets the CAA, right, the Canadian authorities, and the FAA's declarations of compliance. I think it's around $1,700, $1,800 for the parachute itself. Yeah, they're getting where you fit in, and then so they've got this for the dock version too. So you can put this on your dock drone. You can fly first responder missions. You can fly over construction sites. You can fly over, security. Think about like a large complex. You could be able to,
and that's not even screwed in like the other one is. It's just wrapped around the props or the arms of the props. Rather.
Yep.
Rubber bands.
Well, another great episode. We covered quite a few topics. We talked revisited the Orsted windmill farm, drone usage, talked a little about their integration of, spent a decent amount of time talking drone delivery, Flytrex, congratulations, 100,000 deliveries completed in the, spent a little time talking about drone noise and some complaints that we've seen come out publicly in regards to Amazon, and then also layoffs with their reallocating potentially of resources and focusing, from what they say, more on in Fort Drum, New York, the Army was looking at some anti-drone counter UAVs that they could get out onto the advanced battle, the contemporary operating environment that we're seeing in this more of a modern warfare time. And then the IKEA drones, where Terry's gonna go start his own. We look forward to seeing the company name, and then also when you get your website up, let me know first. But no, we checked out the IKEA drones that for inventory and warehouses, and honestly, Terry, with you saying to go to the website, that really, for anybody that was watching here on YouTube, that really gain from that article. So sometimes you just forget how easy it is to just go to a website. Landing drone batting cage at the University of Texas being used for, enabling and facilitating advanced research and allowing both students on campus and faculty to really push the limitations when it comes to operations and risks in the Shark drone pilot out in San Diego. What was it? What was the handle again? Samuel, you remembered what it was? Scott
Fairchild.
Scott Fairchild. Check out Scott Fairchild videos. And then we ended in the regulatory corner. We ended up looking at the AVSS parachute recovery system for the Mavic 3 Enterprise series drones that allows for operations over people. So with the drone itself, depending on the thermal or the visual and the parachute, you're under $10,000, and you have a drone that you can, operate almost anywhere as long as you have the required airspace authorizations while flying over people and moving vehicles in a transient manner. So that's a really huge advance. And looked at a couple questions that we'll touch back on, in the weeks to come regarding commercial UAV, what we can expect to see and developing after that show in the very beginning of August. Great show.
Mouthful.
Thanks, Terry, Samuel. Yeah.
I'm kind of looking forward specifically for the show to kind of hear about those answers. Those are, I think, some very pertinent questions that were raised. So excited to hear more about that specifically.
Awesome. Terry, you got anything for us in closing for the listeners? Awesome. Fantastic. Well, thanks again. Thank you, Samuel. Thank you, Terry, for your insights. We appreciate everybody tuning in to Weekly Wings, dronelife.com podcast, in order to spend a little time with us here, going through some of the latest news, topics, and happenings in the UAS industry and the somewhat encompassing umbrella around unmanned systems and technology. So thank you, everybody. As always, have a great week, and we will see